Good afternoon. How are you? Let's see if I can see down here. Well, I want to thank Donna Holt and Campaign for Liberty for having me. You know, as a Tea Party member, it's a privilege to be here with Campaign for Liberty and Ron Paul supporters where the revolution gave birth, right? Your Campaign for Liberty and Dr. Paul have a long history of working towards things like restoring federalism and returning power back to the states, and even repealing the 17th Amendment in order to achieve that. And now, millions of people across this country stand with you. And why is that? You know, according to a recent polling that was done by both Rasmussen and Gallup, a majority of Americans either A, believe we've spent too much on stimulus, duh. B, believe it either hasn't helped the economy or has actually hurt it. And C, are overwhelmingly opposed to further stimulus spending. Does anyone in here want more stimulus spending? No. But despite the fact that 65% of all Americans are opposed to additional stimulus spending, the leaders were called back to Congress earlier last month to pass $26 billion stimulus package for teachers' unions and other government employees. States must realize that the mandates that come attached to federal money far outweigh perceived benefits of that federal money, especially when that money only postpones the inevitable, which is the inevitable budget shortfalls that we know that are on the horizon. It is nonsensical that Congress, with its voracious appetite for spending, and has a $13 trillion debt to prove it, insists that it knows best how citizens' money should be spent at the state level. So what's really wild about this, if you think about this, is we have a federal government with no balanced budget telling states who have balanced budgets how to spend their money. That's insane. This congressional addiction to spending money it doesn't have isn't the worst of our problems, though. Even though you've got auto bailouts, Wall Street bailouts, mortgage bailouts, union bailouts, and the billions and billions of dollars of stimulus funding. A worse problem is that the states are becoming more and more dependent on the federal money and the federal government. That's where the real problem is. Because if the states didn't need the money, the federal government wouldn't need to dole it out. Regardless of the political party in power, states have surrendered their sovereign prerogatives in return for federal handouts. This alone has given the federal government the ability to intrude in areas that the Constitution has reserved to the states. And unless states stop voluntarily yielding state power to Washington, their complaints about federal intrusiveness will ring hollow. We need to take care of our own backyard first. States must get off the federal dole, or they will become forever dependent on federal largesse, and ultimately, we will become subservient wards of Congress. State legislators and governors have failed to muster the political courage to say no, out of concern that federal funds intended for their respective states will go to another state. States' inactions only emboldens Congress. What has it done? Our inaction of unfunded mandates and taking these unfunded mandates produced the health care bill. It produced $26 billion bailout package that forces new mandates on the states, and the governor is told that if he turns it down, that Congress can circumvent the state and the governor and give it straight to the school districts and bypass the governor. We must empower states with a constitutionally legitimate tool to check the powers of the federal government. I say we give the states a veto from the federal government spending. You know, James Madison saw the danger of an unfettered Congress, and I know for the fact that you guys are here that many of you have heard this quote. It says, if Congress can do whatever in their discretion can be done by money and will promote the general welfare, we love that clause, don't we? The government is no longer a limited one, possessing enumerated powers, but it is an indefinite one, subject to particular exceptions. State legislators should insist on a constitutional amendment that would give states the authority to repeal any federal law, rule, or regulation with 2/3 states' majority. A formal method to restrain the federal government is in the best interest of all state legislators, whether Republican or Democrat, if we truly want to restore federalism. States should have the ability to say no to George Bush's No Child Left Behind, to Barack Obama's health care, or to congressional spending sprees that we've seen in the last year and a half, or 8 years. Madison saw the benefit of adequate checks and balances and stated in the Federalist Paper that an elective despotism was not the government we fought for, but one in which the powers of government should be so divided and balanced among the several bodies that no one could transcend their legal limits without effectually checked and restrained by the others. And here's an interesting quote by Alexander Hamilton. You know, he was a strong advocate of a vigorous federal government. And even he recognized the sovereignty of the states and the need for citizens and states to hold the federal government accountable if it should ever, quote, overpass the just bounds of its authority. He wrote that, quote, state governments possess inherent advantages which will ever give them an influence and ascendancy over the national government and will forever preclude the possibility of federal encroachments. This is from Alexander Hamilton, that we would be able to push back on federal encroachments. That their liberties indeed can be subverted by the federal head is, quote, repugnant to every rule of political calculation. That's from Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton also wrote that if the federal government should ever overpass the just bounds of its authority and make a tyrannical use of its power, the people whose creature it is must appeal to the standard they have formed and take such measures to redress the injury done to the Constitution. You know, our Constitution was originally constructed by the founders. U.S. senators in the 17th Amendment were elected by our state legislators, and they were supposed to be representatives of the state. And we lost that in the 17th Amendment when we replaced senators chosen by state legislators with elected senators. Giving the states the ability to repeal congressional acts with support of 2/3 of the states would be a powerful tool to restore the balance of power between the federal and the state government. The state government needs the ability to just say no. It is about time that states regained their veto power to stop the irresponsible concentration of power in the federal government. And it is up to those of us sitting in our chairs at homes, spreading this message to everybody. And I know that it can be done because we've said no once. We said it with the Healthcare Freedom Act, the Tea Party, and Campaign for Liberty. We told the government no. And we believe in going big and going home. And we need to get together and tell the federal government no more and use the power that we have in the states to make it happen. Thank you.